This is the little alleyway that I'm going to be painting, called the Rue de la Seminaire. It's right next to my gallery, which is in front of me there. Starting with a charcoal sketch to get in the composition and proportions. Working on a ground canvas with just a mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue and white, just to get a grey warm ground on there, which just makes it easier to see lighter tonal values straight away. So there's the sketch. Here's the palette I'm using, which is titanium white, cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, carmine red, burnt sienna, ultramarine burnt umber, ultramarine blue and phthalo blue. Start off just getting in some of these light tones, so I'm using mainly a bit of ochre and white here, a little bit more ochre in here. This is a painted wall, it's in sunlight in front of me, and this one is got a bit more burnt sienna in. I'm just marking the white that goes around the windows, so I can compare that. So that's going to be almost, I guess, the highest light of the picture. Compare that to tones on the walls, and now going a little bit greyer down into the next house, and then immediately get some dark tones on. So right up here under the eaves, almost black, just to get that pretty much as dark as possible. I just usually mix a bit of burnt umber and ultramarine blue to get that really dark, and that gives me a tonal range between that's 1 o'clock, a tonal range between the darkest dark and the lightest lights. And now these mid-tones going in on the right hand side. This wall is in shadow and it's basically a stone wall, very warm stone. So you put a lot of burnt sienna in there and a bit of ochre. Shadows are obviously always cooler, or usually cooler, so on the street they're really quite cool. And then there's a little strip of stonework right in front of me, so it changes colour there at the bottom of the painting. So there we are, sort of just roughing in everything right the way through the middle there. There's a hill in the far distance, sunlit with a lot of green trees, and then of course the sky, and I'm using phthalo blue and white for the sky, a little bit greyed down. There's a bit of colour on my brush off the palette, it's not pure. I'll let it go a little bit yellower at the bottom and a little bit redder at the top. I'll get a bit more colour into this sunlit wall. That's got to come up quite bright, so now I can see against the other colours of the painting, which have had their first layer, how much to pull that sunlit wall out. I don't want to overdo it. It's nothing worse than just making it far too bright and garish. I like it to look just subtly sunlit, not screaming out of the picture. There's a signboard, a white signboard on that house there, but of course it's in the shadow, so it's grey. A pot here which I'm doing. Side of the road. At this point, you know, I've got a good idea of how it's all looking, and I just start refining, making that sunlit wall come out sunnier. Shadows look to see where they get darker and where they get lighter. That wall on the right hand side gets lighter as it comes towards me, and deeper and darker as it goes further higher up and under the eaves. The shadow that's underneath that wall does the same thing. gets lighter as it comes towards me. So I'll look at that in a moment. After I've played around a little bit with the balance of those lights and darks and colour relationships, I start looking at a few details and see how they look in place. These white sort of cemented blocks that frame the windows next to go in. I'm not using pure white there by a long way. It's softened down into a warm, slightly warm grey white, so it doesn't jar. And now looking into the light through there, and there's some trees in the foreground, and then it jumps right back into the background hill, and there's some houses on that hill. Obviously all that detail's not important, but just to get the effect has got to be right. I'm just looking at these sunlit trees now. Slightly deeper shadows and a slightly stronger green than what goes on the distant hill behind it. Just refining a few details now. Finally, there's a wire that comes down the side of this house under these windows and goes across to that lamp. So first I put the wire in, and then of course there's a shadow coming from that wire, so I'll put that in. And that's the final picture there.